Hey, welcome to Fusion 912. 912 is what we do usually on a Wednesday night at 6:30 to 8:30. But 912 would be our high school students. And so we just want to welcome you with us. It's great to have you with us. Make sure that you say hi and check in if you are with us. We are going to jump right in here today. And we are finishing up a series called God's Greatness. And today, the title of the message is He is Holy. And so I'm going to go ahead and pass it on over to my partner here, Jacob, and he's going to take us away.
Yeah, so holiness and holy, the word holy is something we hear a lot in the Bible.
That's another churchy word.
Yeah, it is a very, I think this entire series is very churchy.
Both of them, yes. The one for middle school, 58, and the one for 912 high school, yeah.
But, yeah, anyway, holy is a word that we hear a ton in the Bible, and most of the time it is used to describe God. But the definition of holy, actually the first definition that'll pop up on Google is it describes God. But the definition that doesn't include the word God in it is being set apart. So God's holiness, and this is just, bear with me, this may take a bit to wrap your head around. So, God is set apart from us because we revoked Him way back, and we keep doing that, but because we revoked Him by letting sin into our world. He is set apart because He does not have sin. He is free from sin. He's not affected by sin. We are affected by sin. We have sin. We deal with it all the time. His holiness is because we have sin. So the question I want you to wrap your head around is, if God is set apart, separated from sinners, would He lose His holiness by becoming man, by coming down to be among sinners?
Good question.
So, I mean, if you want to quick comment something, but I'm going to just keep going on. So, if you think of this from a straightforward point of view, you would say, yes, He is less holy. He went from being entirely separated from sin in heaven, no sin, nothing related to sin. He's up there, and now He comes down to earth. Yes, He would lose His holiness in a sense that He is no longer set apart or separated. He's down among sinners, among the sin. But if you look at it from what it actually is, He may physically, His location becomes less holy, but in fact, His character becomes more holy. What person would send their son, would come down themselves down into the heart of their enemy's territory and die for that enemy? Why would a God choose to live and die as flesh? Why would a God choose to leave His throne in heaven? Why would any God choose to come down from His perfect place, come down to be among, just the filth of humanity? I mean, God, or Jesus on earth, He was spotless. 1 Peter talks about Jesus being unblemished and spotless. He knew no sin. I mean, Christ was perfect. He was God on earth. He was a prince that lived a pauper's life. But in fact, doing that, Christ didn't lose His holiness. He gained it. He gained even more holiness. I mean, when he came down among sinners, yes, his physical location wasn't as holy. He wasn't living in like the 5-star hotel heaven, but he was down among, and just the way he acted, the way he taught, that was holy and set apart. I mean, he taught things that were radical to most Jews and to Judaism. Love your enemy. Turn the other cheek. Forgive one another. Do not judge people. Love one another. Love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, it goes on and on and on. The things that he taught that totally went against what the Jews were used to and what the rest of the world was used to. I mean, he lived and he worked and he taught among, lepers and prostitutes and tax collectors. He was in the thick of it. He was so different and so set apart in a way from the Pharisees and the teachers and the religious people of the time that they hated him for it, and they ended up killing him for it. It was his holiness that got him killed. But even in death and even on the cross, Christ was still holy. He was set apart. He was set apart from the other criminals that hung there with him. He radiated a calm. There was something about him that even as the criminal to his side, even as he was dying for a crime he did commit, so he must have been some terrible crime. But even as that criminal was dying for committing a crime, he saw that Jesus was holy. He saw that this man next to him was set apart. Jesus, to the Roman soldier that saw Jesus hanging there on that cross and repented, he was set apart. He even asked for forgiveness from his Father onto the ones who were killing him. No person in their right mind, to the Jews, to what the world would say would be normal, would do that. And then after that, God's holiness, that same holiness that took Christ through life, from being born in the manger and in the stable, to dying on the cross, to being risen again, to ascending into heaven, that same holiness that took Christ through life is now available for us. 2 Corinthians 7:1 says, "Therefore, since we have these promises, dear friends, let us purify ourselves from everything that contaminates the body and the spirit, perfecting holiness out of reverence for God." I mean, our body is, I'm sure you've all heard the analogy, our body is it's God's temple now. We are to make it pure and holy, free from sin, from sexual immorality, from, lust, from coveting, all these bad things that can just, filth up our body. We are to become and strive to be holy like God. And, the thing is that, it's impossible for us to become truly set apart, truly clean, we can't be perfect. We can't. It's impossible. So we strive to be as much like God, to be as holy as God, and as just embody the character of God as much as we can. And then God covers the rest. 2 Timothy 1:9 says, "He has saved us and called us to a holy life, not because of anything we have done, but because of his own purpose and grace. This grace was given to us in Christ Jesus before the beginning of time." I mean, we can strive as much as we want to be as holy and as perfect, and the truth of the matter is we're still going to mess up. But because of Christ's holiness and the way Christ lived his life and the way Christ died in his life, we can now take Christ's holiness, some of that holiness, and God cleans us with that holiness. And we become holy like God even more than we could on our own, trying to be perfect. We are commanded to become holy like God. We are commanded to strive to be holy, to steer away from evil, to try to keep ourselves as pure and as holy and just as loving as possible. But the great thing is that when we mess up, God covers the rest. So we stay in God's grace and his holiness. The final point I'm going to leave you guys with before Derek takes over is God is holy because he is love. Therefore, we are holy because God has gifted us with his graciousness and his love. But we are holy when we become love. I don't know if any of you have heard of him, but Bob Goff. Have you heard of him?
I feel like the name is familiar,
Yeah,
but I can't place why.
He's a fabulous guy. Like, he's such a cool guy. He's a lawyer. He's the Ugandan consular to he's the American consular to Uganda. Or no, Ugandan consular to the U.S.
Okay.
But just like little things like that. But he's such a cool life, such a cool guy, and he's a great speaker and a writer. And one of his books, Becoming Love, is one of his books, and it talks about how God and Jesus became love for us, so we are to become love for him. Yeah. And love everyone we meet, everyone that we encounter, and it helps. It furthers us in our holiness to become like God.
The awesome thing, in part 2, we talked about the awesomeness of God, just how awesome he is, and that's really hard to wrap your brains around, but to wrap our brains around. But just another awesome thing about God is that in his holiness and how set apart he is, the greatest commandment is not that we strive to be like him. The greatest commandment is that we strive to love him.
Yeah.
And then as we love him, we naturally end up becoming more like him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is so cool. Jacob, what is one of the most awe-inspiring places that you've ever been? In other words, like a place where you walk in and it's just amazing. You just want to stand and take it all in.
I think the coolest, most awe-inspiring place I've ever been is in South Dakota, the Black Hills, where Mount Rushmore is. We actually camped out in Custer State Park for, I think it was 2 or 3 nights, and went around that place. And it's absolutely beautiful. The trees, the rocks, there was a lake, it was crystal clear, that is the most awe-inspiring place I've ever been. I can't even explain just how amazing it is.
Awesome. And that's actually funny that you say I can't even explain how it is. I'm going to get to that in a second, because we want to talk about something about that. I see a couple of you have checked in. That's awesome. Thanks for joining us. Why don't you share with us, while we're talking here, one of the most awe-inspiring places that you've ever been, or a couple if you have them. I talk about it all the time, but mine was Machu Picchu by far. It blows anything. And I've been to Alaska, which was gorgeous. I've been to Puerto Rico, which was absolutely gorgeous as well. But man, Machu Picchu was just... It's crazy because you're standing up on top of this mountain. I don't know how many feet above sea level it is. I can't remember. But and you're looking out at the group of Andes Mountains, around it. And first of all, you're high. I mean, you're looking up. And when you ride the bus up, it's it's S-turns the whole way. And then there's coach buses coming both ways, but the road is really thin. And like if you fall off the one, and they're just cruising along, if you fall off the other side, you're tumbling a ways. But it's incredible, and you're hot. You're close to the equator, so you're hot. But then you look out, and you see mountains that are even higher than that. They're snow-capped because they're higher than that. And so you're standing there like sweating, thinking, how can they have snow on them? That's crazy. It's just definitely one of the most beautiful places. that I've been most awe-inspiring. I just, I would go back in a heartbeat and still take it all in and just stand there and take in the incredibleness of it. Well, the story, thanks for sharing. I see one of you shared one of the places that you've been that was just kind of awe-inspiring. I want to share with you out of Isaiah 6, 1 through 7. So if you have your Bible, go ahead and turn to Isaiah 6. If you don't have your Bible, I would encourage you to go ahead and pause, go grab your Bible and come back and continue watching. But Isaiah 6, chapter 6, verses 1 through 7. And here's what I want you to do as I read this. Try to really focus in on the words and read along. This is, and put yourself where Isaiah is describing. This is, you want to talk about a place that's awe-inspiring. This is incredible. So listen to what Isaiah writes. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord seated on a high and lofty throne, and the hem. Other versions say train. The Hebrew word used there is, you can use train or hem, of his robe filled the temple. Seraphim were standing above him. They each had 6 wings. With 2 they covered their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they flew. And one called to another, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of armies. His glory fills the whole earth." The foundations of the earth, of the doorways, shook at the sound of their voices. And the temple was filled with smoke. Then I said, "Woe is me, for I am ruined, because I am a man of unclean lips and live among a people of unclean lips. And because my eyes have seen the King and the Lord of armies." Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. Verse 7, he touched my mouth with it and said, Now that this has touched your lips, your iniquity is removed and your sin is atoned for. What an incredible scene. What an incredible scene. Let's go back over and look at a few things. I want to point a few things out, and I really want to take this scene in as well. So first of all, Isaiah starts out by talking about how King Uzziah died, and I saw the Lord. Why would you're about to describe that you just saw the Lord, and before you say King Uzziah died? Now, he says in the year that King Uzziah died, and so maybe he was trying to give a little bit of a timeline of when this happened. But also, according to what I studied, King Uzziah was a king who reigned for 52 years, and he was a successful king. He was a good king. And so this would have been a time of transition for the people. And so I'm sure there was some chaos, some uncertainty. And so Jeremiah is careful to record that in the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. And I didn't just see the Lord, I saw the Lord seated on his throne. Now that's important and that's easy to skip over because the Lord was not pacing back and forth going, oh boy, what am I going to do now? He was seated in his throne. And so what he's doing there is he is admitting to the sovereignty of the Lord. I saw the sovereign king. Our king died. And in the year that he died, I saw the sovereign king, the one who's in control, the one who rules everything. I also want to point out that whenever, I always thought that in Isaiah, whenever he says, woe to me, for I am ruined, I always thought that he was saying like, I'm dead, I'm done. But actually, if I can find it here real quick, I lost my place. He says, I am ruined. It actually is, I must be silent. Is what he's saying there. I must be silent. So I found that kind of interesting, and I'll get to that in a minute as well. Again, we're just taking a moment to take this scene in. We don't want to skip over everything. If you notice, Pastor Gary actually just talked about this past Sunday, that when Isaiah says Lord, he says Lord, capital L, lowercase O-R-D, right? So he's not calling God by name. like the angels do. If you continue reading on, the angels say, holy, holy, holy is the Lord, capital Lord. It's all caps, because they are saying his name, which we're not sure how to pronounce it. If again, Pastor Gary talked in the first part of the, I believe the series is called I Am, and I would encourage you to check it out on our YouTube channel as well. But he goes into great detail talking about a great explanation of the Lord's name, and we're not sure if Yahweh is even pronounced Yahweh. That's what we've kind of adopted, is that it's Yahweh. But anyway, so when Isaiah sees the Lord, he says Lord, capital L, lowercase O-R-D, and what he's doing there is he is ascribing his position, and that is the sovereign king. He's calling him by his position, not his name. The angels are calling God by his name, capital Lord, and what we would pronounce Yahweh, but again, we're not completely sure that that's how it's pronounced. So it's just interesting how the angels interact with God and how Isaiah interacted with God. Also, Isaiah, I already talked about that. The train or hem of his robe fills the temple. Can you just imagine that for a moment? That's the end of his robe. Just the end of his robe, right, fills the temple. I don't know how big the temple was, but I would imagine, and there are
pretty big.
yeah, absolutely. And actually, there are places in the Old Testament where we're told how big they were to build it. And now this is not the heavenly temple. This is as Isaiah was going into the temple, that he saw the Lord. And so you can figure that out if you take time to study it. I didn't take time to study how big the temple was, because there's a lot of detail surrounding it. But anyway, Isaiah, it's pretty big. And Isaiah says that just the hem, the end of his robe, the end of his train fills the temple. Now the train, why is that important? The train communicates honor. If you think about kings and queens, they have a long train. And at a wedding ceremony, the bride usually has a train. She's being honored as she should be as she comes down the aisle. And so the train communicates honor. It fills the temple. Just the end of it fills the temple. And then the seraphim, when you talk about angels, you want to talk about angels that aren't cute and cuddly. Think about 6 wings. And the seraphim is actually translated fiery ones or burning ones.
Great.
And so I don't think that they were cute and cuddly little chubby angels flying around with a bow.
That's probably why they said, do not be afraid.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Good point. But check this out. Their faces are covered and their feet are covered. They use 4 of their 6 wings to cover their eyes, and 2 to cover their eyes, 2 to cover their feet. Feet were considered unclean, and there's thoughts that feet were talking about other areas of them that were considered unclean. And the seraphim describe God. This is how they describe God. They don't say love, love, love. They don't say grace, grace, grace. They say holy, holy, holy. That's how he's described. Holy. He's pure. He's sacred. As Jacob talked about, he is set apart. Now, have you ever been somewhere that you tried to explain to someone? I was talking to Jacob about that, how he was saying you got to be there, or you have to go, or I can't explain it. That's what you said. I can't explain it, yeah. And whenever I talk about Machu Picchu, some of you talked about Africa and Crater Lake and Oregon, that it's one of those things where you come back and you want to explain it to your friends. You want to, even showing them pictures just doesn't do it justice. You're like, you have to go. When I show pictures at Machu Picchu, I often remember how I felt before we left and thinking, oh, it's kind of cool, what's so great about it? Why is it one of the 7 wonders of the world? And then I went and I was like, okay, I definitely get why this is one of the 7 wonders of the world. But when I show people pictures of it, I'm just like, you have to go. You have to go to get it. And that's the thing, is that words fall completely short. Isaiah is trying to record this in great detail. He's trying to explain to us how holy God is. But obviously words fall completely short. I want you to check out what he says in verse 5, because his response should help us gain more understanding of how holy God is. I mean, his immediate response was that he understands just how separate, how set apart he is from God. There's a commercial where a guy, he's a really short guy, well, compared to Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's an NBA player. I think everyone's short to NBA players if you're not an NBA player. But this guy in the commercial was really short, and for some reason he agrees to play horse against Giannis, and he tells Giannis that that Giannis can go first. And so Giannis throws the basketball up off the backboard, jumps up and throws it down with two hands. And this guy just looks at him and goes, I'll just take an H. And so the guy realizes just how far apart they are in their skills and their abilities. And he's like, yeah, it just kind of reminds me, even though he says I'll just take an H, it just kind of reminds me of what Isaiah says, woe, for I am ruined. I must close my mouth. The guy's like, I can't do anything. I'm just going to take an H. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. There's nothing I can do. Again, what can we do or say to even come close to being worthy of being in the presence of God? And I think that's how Isaiah is feeling. So here's my point. God's gift of grace is much greater when we understand how holy he is. That's the whole point of understanding how holy God is that when we understand, we can't even begin to wrap our minds around how holy he is. And when we come to understand that, his grace for us is so much greater. It's not watered down. And here's the thing. Have you ever said holy cow?
I have.
Yeah?
Holy cow.
Yeah, I've definitely said holy cow as well.
Cows are holy.
They are. I actually remember as a young kid, I was in a store and some random guy said holy cow. I think he said holy cow. He might have said something else, ascribed holy to something else. And I was like, that's not holy. Only God is holy. I was a kid and I had a lot of guts then. I had no worries about how he would respond. But we cheapen the word holy by just using it with anything. And so it's not as weighty as it should be. He is holy, pure, and glorious. So holy, so set apart that even the angels, the seraphim, that they worship, that's what they do. They worship in the throne room of God day and night. And they cover their eyes because of how set apart he is. And here's the thing, I'm going to close with this. The very awesome thing about God is that the thing that sets him apart from us is also the thing that brings forgiveness. The thing that sets him apart for us is actually also the thing that brings forgiveness. Let's look at Isaiah 6:6-7 again. Then one of the seraphim flew to me, and in his hand was a glowing coal that he had taken from the altar with tongs. Now God had instructed the seraphim to do this. He touched my mouth with it and said, now that this has touched your lips, your iniquity is removed, and your sin is atoned for. I'll close with this quote from a commentary that I was reading. This is the quote. Merciful grace belongs as much to the essence of God's holiness as justice and purity. Because God is holy, he is a just and pure God, but he is also a merciful God because he is holy. We're going to go ahead and get into some worship. I'm going to invite Bree up. I'm really excited to have Bree. She's a former student of ours and helped lead worship when she was a student in the youth ministry here. And so it's just really exciting for me to ever come back and help lead worship. So she's going to come up, and I would just encourage you to, if you're not already in a place where you can just hang out and really focus in and worship on God, I would encourage you to get in that space and spend some time worshiping him. Come on up, Bree.
Hello, everybody. We're going to do some singing here, if that's all right. Lord, I come, I confess, bowing here, I find my rest, and without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you, oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my soul to rise to you when temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my
is everybody today? I hope everybody's enjoying the worship and the message and the words that Derek shared with y'all. All right.
You were the word at the beginning, one with God the Lord Most High. Your hidden glory in creation, now revealed in you are Christ. What a beautiful name it is. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a beautiful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a beautiful name it is. The name of Jesus. Didn't want heaven without us. So Jesus, you brought heaven down. Your sin was great, your love was greater. What could separate us now? What a wonderful name it is. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a wonderful name it is. Nothing compares to this. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a wonderful name it is. The name of Jesus. Death could not hold you. The veil tore before you. Silence the boast of sin and grave. The heavens are roaring the praise of your glory. For you are raised to life again. You have no rival. You have no equal. Now and forever, God, you reign. Yours is the kingdom. Yours is the glory. Yours is the name above all names. What a powerful name it is. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus Christ, my King. What a powerful name it is. Nothing can stand against. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus. What a powerful name it is. The name of Jesus.
Dear Lord, I just want to close in prayer today and thank you so much for the opportunity that we have to come and still be able to get your message out to the students and the teenagers. And I pray that anybody watching who had anything special touch their hearts would maybe reach out to Derek or somebody else just to ask any questions. And thank you so much that we had the opportunity to still worship and praise you despite everything going on in the world. In your name, amen.